Welcome to Episode 80, Narratives and Cross-Mapping Tables for R2, where we explore how written explanations and mapping tools form the backbone of an auditable R2 submission. A well-crafted narrative transforms technical implementation into understandable evidence, showing assessors not only what controls exist, but how they operate in practice. In R2, clarity equals credibility. Vague or inconsistent descriptions can weaken otherwise strong programs. Narratives and mapping tables bridge the gap between framework expectations and real-world operations, connecting each requirement to its corresponding process, evidence, and owner. When written precisely, they become living records of assurance, proving that compliance is not theoretical but active and measurable. Narratives matter at R2 because they communicate intent and capability beyond checklists. They explain why each control exists, what risk it addresses, and how it operates across systems and teams. An auditor reading a narrative should understand the organization's environment well enough to visualize control execution without being on site. For example, rather than stating backups occur regularly, a strong narrative describes frequency, location, verification steps, and restoration testing. The goal is to make every control story self-contained, factual, and verifiable. Narratives reflect maturity when they read like professional documentation rather than compliance slogans. They demonstrate understanding, not just completion. The standard structure of an R2 narrative includes three core sections: context, intent, and implementation. Context establishes the operating environment and scope of the control. Intent explains what the control aims to achieve, and implementation details how it functions day to day. This format keeps information organized and easy to assess. For instance, context might describe a hybrid infrastructure. Intent might focus on data integrity, and implementation might detail automated scripts that verify checksums nightly. Adhering to this structure ensures consistency across contributors, allowing reviewers to compare narratives quickly. A uniform pattern also helps maintain readability for future assessments and internal updates. Precise identifiers and requirement references anchor each narrative to its formal framework location. Every control should clearly state its citation, such as Requirement 12.1.2, and any related clauses or external standards it supports. Ambiguous labeling can cause misalignment between evidence, mapping, and auditor testing. For example, a control referring to user access without specifying the corresponding R2 identifier risks confusion when cross-checked against reports. Embedding exact identifiers transforms narratives into reliable reference points that integrate seamlessly with cross-mapping tables and traceability matrices. This precision eliminates debate about which control applies where, allowing auditors to focus on substance rather than navigation. Explicit mention of systems, owners, and frequencies grounds each narrative in operational reality. Controls exist through people and technology, so narratives should name the systems performing the function, the individuals or teams responsible, and how often actions occur. For instance, describing the Security Operations Center reviews alert dashboards every 24 hours conveys more confidence than general phrases like alerts are monitored. Ownership provides accountability, and frequency demonstrates discipline. Including these details transforms abstract descriptions into measurable routines, proving that control operation is structured and repeatable rather than ad hoc. Evidence pointers make narratives actionable. Each should identify where supporting documentation resides, using paths, file names, and timestamps when available. This directs assessors efficiently to proof without searching through repositories. For example, a narrative might state, see Evidence Folder 3A, Backup Verification Logs, file dated July 10, 2025. Pointers reduce confusion, prevent duplication, and show that evidence management itself is mature. Over time, consistent citation format across all narratives becomes a powerful internal tool for self-audit, ensuring every claim can be substantiated instantly. Evidence pointers are not decoration, they are navigation aids for verification. Scope boundaries and exclusions must be stated explicitly within each narrative to avoid ambiguity. If a control applies only to certain systems, regions, or data types, that limitation must be documented. Likewise, exclusions should note who approved them and why. For instance, if a non-production environment is excluded from patch compliance, the narrative should explain its isolation and supporting rationale. Clarity prevents scope creep and supports transparency during assessor review. Without these details, reviewers may question whether omissions were deliberate or accidental. Defining boundaries in the narrative transforms potential weak points into visible, justified decisions. Inheritance statements and provider artifacts connect narratives to external assurance sources. When controls are inherited from service providers or parent entities, the narrative must state the provider's name, the exact control inherited, and the artifact verifying its operation, such as an attestation or audit report. For example, physical security controls are inherited from cloud provider X, validated through their annual SOC 2 Type 2 report. These statements show that dependencies are managed, not assumed. Proper referencing also ensures that provider evidence aligns temporally and contextually with the organization's assessment window, maintaining continuity of assurance across boundaries. Exceptions, waivers, and compensating controls capture deviations transparently. Every framework allows flexibility when justified, but those justifications must be explicit. A waiver indicates formal approval to delay or modify a control, while a compensating control describes an alternate safeguard achieving equivalent protection. For example, if vulnerability scanning cannot run on an isolated medical device, compensating controls like physical isolation and periodic manual review may apply. Documenting these exceptions within the narrative demonstrates honesty and control over risk rather than concealment. It also allows assessors to evaluate whether mitigations meet the framework's intent, sustaining credibility throughout the review. Consistent terminology prevents contradictions between narratives. Terms such as system owner, administrator, or security officer should mean the same thing across all documentation. Similarly, time references, like quarterly or annually, should follow defined organizational calendars. Contradictions confuse reviewers and imply weak coordination. For instance, if one narrative describes encryption managed by information technology, while another credits infrastructure operations, confidence erodes. Establishing and enforcing a shared glossary of terms keeps all contributors aligned. This consistency turns individual narratives into a cohesive story of governance that stands up to scrutiny under both internal and external review. The cross-mapping table links each R2 requirement to other frameworks or internal controls. It functions like a translation chart, showing how one set of expectations satisfies another. For example, a control ensuring secure authentication may also meet related requirements in NIST 853 and ISO 27001. A well-structured mapping table saves duplication and clarifies coverage gaps. It also simplifies communication with stakeholders who operate under different standards. In essence, the table converts scattered compliance efforts into an integrated framework, revealing where controls overlap and where investment should be targeted. The traceability matrix extends this mapping by connecting requirements, controls, evidence, and test results in one view. Maintaining and versioning this matrix ensures that every claim can be followed from high-level policy to specific artifact. For instance, an auditor can trace a statement in the narrative about patch management to the actual ticket record verifying completion. Version control preserves history, showing when mappings or evidence changed and why. The traceability matrix thus becomes a living audit companion, reinforcing that the organization not only knows its controls, but can prove their continuity and evolution over time. Before submission, every narrative and mapping table should undergo internal quality review. This step validates technical accuracy, consistency, and formatting compliance. Reviewers check that identifiers are correct, evidence pointers work, and terminology aligns across documents. Internal review also ensures tone and clarity meet leadership and auditor expectations. For example, catching mismatched control numbers before submission prevents rework later. A structured review checklist promotes fairness and thoroughness across contributors. Quality control at this stage signals maturity and professionalism, demonstrating that assurance materials are treated with the same rigor as operational controls themselves. Finally, leadership-readable executive summary lines bridge technical depth and organizational awareness. Executives rarely need every implementation detail, but they must grasp assurance posture at a glance. Summaries condense each narrative into plain language: what the control does, why it matters, and its current status. For example, all backups are encrypted and verified daily, ensuring business continuity readiness. Such summaries feed board reports, audit responses, and customer communications. They show that assurance is not an isolated technical exercise, but an enterprise-wide discipline communicated in clear, actionable terms. Clear, concise, and verifiable narratives transform R2 from a checklist into a story of accountability. Each description, cross-reference, and mapping table contributes to transparency, showing what exists, how it works, and where proof resides. When consistency and evidence converge, assessors can validate quickly, leadership can understand confidently, and teams can maintain documentation with minimal confusion. A mature R2 program treats narratives not as paperwork, but as living artifacts of governance, each one reflecting the discipline, accuracy, and credibility that true assurance requires.